This is the shifting dynamics of data, isn't it?
It is. Look, the overall picture in terms of coronavirus infections that we know up until this point are that you're looking at least 93,000 confirmed infections globally. Now, here in Asia, the attention continues to shift away from China, where you saw 119 additional infections confirmed by the government here today, which, by the way, is the lowest number since about January 19th, and shifting back towards South Korea, where you saw almost 4 times that number in terms of daily confirmed cases. Now, South Korea has a total of more than 5,300 confirmed infections there. So still a lot of concern about what's happening in South Korea, and we can talk about the fiscal response later. But in terms of what's happening in Middle East, Iran is clearly still an area where there is a lot of fragility in terms of the healthcare system, and the numbers continue to rise in terms of infections. So you've got more than 2,300 people infected, more than 77 deaths in Iran. Europe, you've got additional cases there. In the US, you mentioned this, 9 confirmed deaths now in the United States, and you've had confirmed infections with the coronavirus in the likes of Washington State and North Carolina, even Oregon and New York as well. So the US trying to ramp up their attempts to corral this virus, but continue, of course, these additional numbers continue to add up. And as you say, the World Health Organization coming out saying this is now a much more dangerous disease in terms of lethality, 3.4% mortality from around 1% with the original estimates in terms of how deadly the coronavirus is. It compares, by the way, to influenza, which is about 0.4%. It is still less lethal than SARS and Ebola, but certainly that is added to the concern out there.
So talk me through the policy response mechanism. You had this 50 basis point cut from developed market from the Fed. We have the Aussies on the move. But what's going on in terms of the fiscal response? I look at Indonesia, no plans for now to hold an extra rate meeting. So there's still some prevarication in terms of the policy response from EM and Asia.
Yeah, it's not totally aligned yet, but we have heard from the finance ministry in Indonesia over the last few days saying that they are looking at additional stimulus, but they haven't pulled the trigger in terms of the central bank there. You're right to say that. Malaysia, of course, cut their rates. In terms of South Korea, you're looking at now an additional budget they've drawn up worth about $9.8 billion on top of what was already a record budget. And of course, a lot of that money is going to be channeled towards businesses impacted by the coronavirus. As we said, the infection rate continues to be of deep concern in South Korea. The Filipinos as well, in the Philippines, they've talked about additional stimulus as well, fiscal support measures. They haven't outlined the details, but they're clearly discussing that. In terms of the broader impact of this, we're talking about Japan, and of course, we're focused on what the BOJ might do in terms of the central banks. But in terms of some additional fiscal stimulus that might have been down the line, in terms of the Summer Olympics, that was expected to be a boost for retail, for example, and tourism and travel in that country. It looks like now the discussions are well underway as to whether or not they postpone the Olympics. So that's something else that's being discussed in Japan. Of course, we're looking in Europe at the ECB meeting next week, and the markets are pricing in a 10 basis point cut there. And in terms of additional impacts on the corporates, over in the US, you've got the likes of Amazon confirming that one of their employees has the virus. Ford has banned any travel now for its employees. They've got 2 confirmed cases of employees with the infection over here in China. And other companies like Google and Goldman Sachs and Boeing cancelling key conferences for their years as well over in the US, again, as corporates try to align themselves and shelter their employees from the spread of this virus.